Meeting is now live.
Mute themselves. Thank you. Yeah, we were getting some feedback there. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. I am joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Ryu, O'Farrell, De Leon, and Mr. Lee. I believe will be joining us shortly. Before we call the roll, I just want to make a special mention to Mr. Ryu. David, this is, as I understand, your last meeting as a member of the Public Works Committee, and I just want to say you've been such an amazing member of this committee. You continue to be, and I think it's appropriate because you have also been a Lorax, and one of the big items on this has to do with trees, which I know you're very passionate about. So we'll save all the rest of the gushy stuff for later, but I wanted to at least acknowledge that this is your last meeting and a fitting meeting because we're dealing with the tree issue. So thank you, David.
Well, Mr. Chairman, can I just quickly say, we won't make this long, but it's been a pleasure to serve, and especially with your chairmanship, this committee has been so easy. You really wrap everything up in a little bow. You make it easy for all of our committee members to know exactly what's happening, what's going on, and you run these meetings so efficiently. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, David. Appreciate that, and hopefully we can keep that trend up today. We got a little bit of trickiness, but we should be able to get through it. So let's start by calling the roll. Ms. Kidd, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, present.
Councilmember Ryu.
Present.
Councilmember De Leon.
Here.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Present.
And Councilmember Lee.
Present.
5 members. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Oh, great. Mr. Lee is here, although for some reason I don't see you on my screen, John. But I'm sure something.
I see all of you.
All right. Well, I'll work on figuring that out, why I don't see you. Okay. Let's start with a little housekeeping. Just remember, if you're not speaking, to put yourself on mute. And at this time, I want to start with public comment on all items. We'll have 1 minute if people are speaking on one item, 2 minutes if they're speaking on two. In addition to, if desired, a 1 minute for general public comment, if requested. And that would be for matters that are within the jurisdiction of this committee. We're going to allow a total of 30 minutes for public comment. And I'll start the clock once we get there. Ms. Kidd, would you please provide the phone number for the public to call in and provide public comment? And also for folks who are calling in, please mute the device you're on listening to the meeting. Before you begin your public comment, you'll be asked to press *6 to unmute your phone when it's time to talk. And then we're going to, just to telegraph, after we hear public comment, I'm going to recommend that we move items 3, 4, 5, and 7 on consent. But we'll get to that later, but I wanted folks in the public to know that as well. So, Ms. Kidd, would you start us off with the phone number for folks to call in and the procedure?
Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 1-669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-073-2397 and then press the number sign. Press the number sign again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, please press *9 to request to speak.
Great. Let's go to public comment.
With the caller with the last 4 digits, 1201, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you would like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Selena. I would like to speak to, I think I'm just providing public comment. Is there an item number?
General public comment, that would be 1 minute.
That one. Just general public comment. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Selena. Good afternoon. My name is Selena Mallon. I'm a research and policy fellow at Tree People. Tree People strongly supports adding Toyon and Mexican elderberry to the protected tree ordinance in the city. Thank you for your leadership and support for this critical issue. To better protect LA's urban forest, we fully support Streets LA or City Forest Officers' requests of providing dedicated staffing for administration and enforcement of the protected tree ordinance and developing an escalated fee structure based on full cost recovery for implementation staff to administer and enforce the protected tree ordinance. Meanwhile, we highly recommend the following items to be considered. Applying a measurement standard of 4 inches cumulative diameter of at 4.5 feet high for the Toyon and Mexican elderberry to be consistent with the other protected species in the ordinance, as well as improving tree replacement mechanisms based on ecosystem service evaluation, and finally, enhancing ordinance enforcement and community engagement. For details, please see the group letter that we co-signed with CFAC and other partners. Thanks again for your consideration.
Thank you. And for the record, that the Toyon elderberry issue is item 2 for anybody who's calling in. Go ahead.
Would the caller with the last 4 digits, 4232, please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. This is Lynette Campy, and I am speaking in favor of adding Toyon and elderberry to the protected tree ordinance. I wanted to add the important point, I believe, that these particular species had outstanding significance to the First Peoples of Los Angeles, and it is one of the missions of CFAC, of which I'm a member, to acknowledge and show respect for the First Nations of the Tongva, Shumach, Tataliam, Kitimok, and Serrano people. We commit to uplifting the names of these lands and community members from over 200 California First Nations who reside along with us, and to honor their traditional ecological knowledge. The strongwood of the Toyon was and is used as a digging stick. The berries of both the Toyon and elderberry were processed and eaten, and the elderberry was and is still used to make flutes, clapper sticks, and little vials to carry medicines for ceremonial purposes, which continue today. I urge you to include these 2 trees or shrubs with protected status that shows respect for the First Peoples. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the caller with the last 4 digits, 7006, please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Me, all the fucking items, and general public comment, please.
I have 2 minutes for all items, 1 minute for general public comment.
Right. Oh, excellent. He knows my name. My daddy calls me nigger, but I appreciate it. Number 2, we're going to protect the Mexican elderberry. I've been fighting for this for 9 years now. And finally you're going to do it.
Huh?
And the Toyon. Now we know that the Greater Valley Glen and Granada Hills neighborhood councils are against it. They're a bunch of niggers. Anybody should protect these lovely trees. Trees are good. Trees. For example, I just called the LAPD on somebody sitting underneath my tree who broke into my gate. The police will be there tomorrow, Bob, at 10 p.m. So, we have number 3. Yes. We have number 4, yes. And I joined Kevin Daly on number 5 for revocable permit. Daily on. You're doing such hard work. You got that revocable permit. It took you 3 months, but you got it. Thank you so much. And then we have the LA Zoo. What the fuck do we have a zoo for? Tear it down and build those pallet shelters. Put them in Griffith Park, dummy. For all the homeless. Build a 12-foot wall around it. And a moat with alligators. And then when people cross, people can a general comment. Do I get my minute? Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're ready.
Oh, yes. Bob, clean up the underpass at Coleman Avenue on Ventura. You promised me they're still selling drugs and giving you 10%. Please get rid of that. Kevin, 101 Freeway underpass. Will you clean that fucking up? You promised me and Mr. Weezer. Finally, David Wu, you've been an awesome guy. You're a good fucking council member. Why did you lose the election? To all you people that voted against David Wu, go fuck yourselves. The guy was the best guy I ever had. You dumb motherfuckers. God bless you, David Wu. I hope you come back and run for controller and get Paul.
Well,
Caller with the last 4 digits. That was his time. Caller with the last 4 digits, 5240. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Hello, this is Paul Edelman, representing both the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. On item 2, both agencies support adding both Toyon and Mexican elderberry to the protected tree ordinance. We urge the committee with the 4-inch cumulative diameter measurement at 4.5 feet. As a plant ecologist, I can tell you that is really the only logical way to make that kind of measurement for that species, given their how dynamic they are and how they grow. And hopefully people will just avoid these protected trees to begin with. So we fully hope you can support going forward with this item and take it to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next call.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 4024. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Last 4 digits, 4024. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Bob, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes. Go ahead.
Please state your name.
God hates homosexuals is my name, cunt. Now,
Mr. Herman,
number two, stop fucking interrupting me, Bob.
1 minute for
fucking
Mr.
asshole. It's my time. I got the floor, asshole. Regarding number 2 and trees in Granada Nigger Hills, what? Stop fucking interrupting me, Bob. Violation of the Brown Act, 54950 to 54963. May I continue on number 3 now? Fuck number 3. And what about number 4, asshole? Fuck Jew number 4, too. And as far as number 5, Kevin De Leon, don't be a criminal and corrupt yourself with those fucking niggers from Los Angeles. And especially the homosexuals who cut me off each time I call into a public meeting with no accommodations. Fuck you. And then we go to the little animals in the zoo. The third speaker who had 3 minutes talked about the alligators. They got sharp teeth. And don't forget why they're in the zoo. Because niggers want to make slaves out of animals. Now I'm going to go to my public comment for 1 minute, you motherfucker. Shut the fuck up. Rule? Thank you, you lose, asshole. Fuck you, Bob. Stop interrupting me. This is my general public comment. 1 minute. That's why in West Covina, I told Gavin Newsom, suck Jew cock. Do you understand, fool?
Mr. Herman, it has to be the item for this committee. This is your last warning.
Fucking trees. I try to say fucking trees and animals, and you interrupt me, fucking nigger. You and your chimpanzee, keep her in a cage.
Okay. He's out. Cut him off.
No,
Cut him off. Next speaker.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 1403. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Last 4 digits, 1403. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Woo! Woo!
Caller with the last 4 digits, 8890. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Hello, I'd like to make a general public comment and also a comment on item number 2.
You have 1 minute on each.
Thank you. My name is Diana Nicole. I am a landscape ecologist. I'm also on the board for Los Angeles Audubon Society. And on item number 2, I am speaking for myself, though I have talked to board members, and they are in agreement with what I'm going to say on my comment on item number 2. But I'd just like to say, in general public comment, shame on you to the callers who are calling in to this meeting for public comment and disrupting something that I value very highly, and I know other people on the call value very highly. I apologize on their behalf to the council members for that language and behavior. As far as item number 2, the Toyon and the elderberry, I am for adding the Toyon and the elderberry to the protected tree ordinance. However, I urge the council members to take up the recommendations made by CFAC and signed on by other organizations such as Tree People, having to do with the measurement rule of 4.5 feet. And also, very important is the in-kind replacements. As an ecologist and a horticulturalist, I can tell you that out-of-kind replacements is problematic. And the point is that we want to protect these trees. I've monitored for years what's happening with the protected tree ordinance and the replacement trees. And unfortunately, there is a pattern of abuse that has been happening with these out-of-kind replacements. We want to make sure we protect the species that were meant to be protected and replace them when they can't be preserved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 4645. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Jamie Hall. I'd like to speak for general public comment and then also on item number 2.
You have 1 minute on each.
Yes, my general public comment is I want to tell Councilman David Rue how much we appreciate what he's done for Council District 4 and everything you've done on environmental issues. You stood with us on top of the Let's Buy a Mountain project in 2015 when we announced that, and we succeeded. We bought 17 acres of open space, and since then we've continued along in that mission, and you've been along with us on that road the entire way, and we really hope this is not the end. There's a new beginning, and we are just so thankful of your service. And then on item number 2, I'm speaking right now just in my capacity as the president of the Laurel Canyon Association and the Laurel Canyon Land Trust. We fully support the addition of the Mexican elderberry and the Toyon. We also support the changes suggested by Tree People in the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. These are really important species that provide habitat and food source for our local urban wildlife. And again, they are important to the first peoples of this state and this local area. And it's just, we want you to move this forward. And so we're happy that we're about to make some progress from an environmental standpoint. And again, I want to say that we urge you to require in-kind replacement, especially for the walnut. You can't mitigate for the loss of a threatened species by planting a different kind of species. That's just basic logic. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Caller with the last 4 digits, 8631. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Last 4 digits, 8631. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
This is Joanne D'Antonio of the Greater Valley Glen Council. We have a filed CIS, and I'd like to speak on item 2.
Okay, you'll get 2 minutes.
Okay, and I also want to make a very quick general public comment thanking David Rue for his help on Cherokee Avenue to save the ficus trees. On item 2, the Greater Valley Glen Council supported the protected tree amendment and then withdrew its support because as currently proposed, it allows these smaller statute trees to be planted to replace larger statute trees, such as the coast live oak and western sycamore. This at the sole discretion of Urban Forestry Chief. The protected tree ordinance, which this motion would amend, is problematic in itself because it has led to the practice of valuable native trees being removed on properties where building plans that include retaining walls and other amenities do not allow sufficient space to properly plant the 4 new trees currently required to be planted on site to replace each removed tree. These replacement saplings are almost always too overcrowded to survive. When this ordinance is applied, the property owner bypasses a CEQA review and pays a small fee to remove trees. The result is no tree protection at a time when the city depends on these trees as the infrastructure that cleans the air, mitigates heat island effect, and provides the staging area for biodiversity. Why did this motion get watered down in the 7 years it is taking to consider it? Because urban forestry cannot handle the workload. If we value the ecosystem services of our native trees, we have to create better management. We need to protect our native trees and not license a developer who pays a small administrative fee to remove a tree that is irreplaceable to the ecosystem. You need to pass a motion that puts a true dollar value on these trees and collect that money from developers who remove trees and then use the funds to run a protected tree program that does not pull from our scant urban forestry budget and that checks the survival of each new tree planted. Read the LA Sand Biodiversity Report. We are overbuilding our natural land. In the future, the city will suffer health issues from the loss of these natively growing trees. The so-called replacement trees are not even protected because they are nursery stock. So let's rethink this and make a much better motion that actually charges what these trees are worth to us. Thank you.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 6314. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, this is Tony Tucci, Chair of Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife. I'd like to speak on item 2 and make a brief public comment.
You have 1 minute for each.
Great, thank you. One of the good things about this item being before this committee is that each committee member here today represents a district with many private properties and parcels which Toyon and Mexican Elderberry thrive. And I choose that word thrive because that's what is happening on the land that hosts these mature trees and shrubs. It's potentially a microsite that possesses good soil, moisture, and aspect. Of course, it's land with high habitat value that not only benefits the wildlife and birds, it benefits the neighboring humans as well. So the planning department has done good work here. It's crafted good environmental policy that recognizes 2 species that help combat drought and climate warming. So when we plan and grow in LA, we should be thinking about these trees along with other climate-related protections and mitigations because their public benefit is real. These trees should not be set aside because it's inconvenient. But isn't that what we've done? We've taken 7 long years on this ordinance. So council members, please vote to support this ordinance with the amended cumulative measurement that people are speaking to. And please consider the consequences of giving discretion to an urban forestry division that over the years has displayed an unwillingness to robustly protect these species. Thank you, council members. And, in public comment, just a brief thank you, Council Member Rue, for your service. You will be greatly missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Call-in user 1, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Jews killed Christ and put on Christmas tree, bitches. Christ died on Christmas tree.
The speaker has already spoken.
Cut him off. Mr. Herman, or Mr. Jordan, how does this work with when someone is disrupting the meeting in a physical meeting, we kick them out of the meeting and that prohibits them from coming back? Mr. Herman is attempting to disrupt the meeting by calling in after he's called multiple times. What is the process?
So you cannot get extra time by calling in different numbers, which Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler, well, I think in this case that was Mr. Herman most recently. The best we can do is, because we're meeting remotely using the Zoom and Google tools, is to not allow them into the meeting. It's a little more, from a practical standpoint, it's a little trickier here because all we're seeing on the display screens are a phone number. So as quickly as we identify them as having already been kicked out of the meeting or trying to extend their time by using a different phone number, they're excluded. But I think that's the only thing at this point that we can do. Once we resume to a regular meeting in-person format, then from a practical standpoint, it's a bit easier for us to do that. But since all we have is a phone number, and we don't necessarily know whose phone number is what, I think what we're doing now is all we can do. As frustrating as that is.
We'll look into that, but Mr. Herman, consider yourself virtually kicked out of this meeting, even though you're welcome to listen to the meeting, but you have already spoken and you're not welcome to speak again. Okay, next caller.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 7180. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, yes, my name is Estrella Steinberg, and I'd like to make a general comment and a public comment on item number 2, I believe it is.
You have 1 minute for each.
I'll start with, how much?
1 minute for each.
Okay, thank you. So, hi, my name is Estrella, and I'm the president of the Historic Highland Park Neighborhood Council. Thank you, council members, for your service. And in 2018, the former Neighborhood Council president submitted a community impact statement on Council File 13-1339. And while I don't exactly know if these get transferred over to me and sort of like I can speak on this, and we can certainly submit our community impact statement by the time it gets to City Council, this is the Neighborhood Council that I lead right now. So this statement is in support of the motion and states that the Toyon elderberry would provide food and shelter for many of our native birds, mammals, and reptiles. And furthermore, I'd like to add that, we are a neighborhood with a lot of development going on, as our own council member Kevin DeLeon is aware, and which is with the freeway and many of the thoroughfares, we need to be aware and implementing as many methods as possible to clean our air. So I just urge you to support this motion. And then as a public comment, I will just add as an individual, not as the president of the Neighborhood Council, as an individual that, I echo the statements that the experts here in favor have made, particularly that of transferring the management of the tree ordinance to to LA Sanitation rather than USC. And furthermore, I really support the council members looking into how to make these meetings more friendly and less racist. I myself was considering very naively putting my own students on this call to listen in and to hear me speak, the students that I lead in at my job. But wow, I'm really glad I did it. So thank you, council members. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Caller with the last 4 digits, 9346. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
This is Snooty Dodson. I represent the Los Angeles Santa Monica Mountains chapter of the California Native Plant Society. We did submit written comments, but I just want to emphasize that we fully support elderberry and Toyon to be included in the protected tree ordinance. I think the ordinance should be amended as the CFAC recommends, and we can do a better job of protecting our native trees from destruction. I think the protected tree ordinance currently doesn't have a lot of teeth in it, and it really isn't enforced. I think if you have a lot of money, you can sidestep it, and that's really regrettable because once the trees are gone, especially oaks and walnuts, they're really not replaceable. Elderberry and Toyon, they're quite easy to grow, and they are a good one-on-one replacement. But once you get rid of an old oak or an old walnut, you've really lost hundreds of years sometimes of habitat. The other thing is I don't think we put a high enough value. Pardon me?
That was your minute. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 6446. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Last 4 digits. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
I would like to make a general public comment and speak on number 2.
1 minute for each.
My name is Clara Solis. I just like to echo the comment about the caller who was using profanity. They should be muted. I mean, that these meetings should be allowed for public and for children to participate, and if we have that, we can't do that. I support the addition of the Toyon and the Mexican elderberry to the protected tree ordinance with the recommendations proposed by the Community Forest Advisory Committee. I live in Highland Park and have lived in environmental justice communities that have seen trees removed and replaced with concrete. This must not continue. In Highland Park, the 31st most dense community in Los Angeles County, our community is currently undergoing much development with projects recommending the wholesale removal of mature trees, including protective trees. I urge you to accept the recommendations recommended by the Community Forest Advisory Committee, such as the measurement standard of 4 inches cumulative diameter at 4.5 feet high for the Toyon and the Mexican elderberry, consistent with the other protected species. I also support that where protected species replacements cannot be accommodated, project design should be altered if absolutely necessary, with the choice of for planting should require the approval of the Board of Public Works at a public hearing, not a designee. And also, the staffing should be a separate unit composed of a biologist, ecologist, an arborist, and an architect, and should be established in a relevant environmental office such as LA Sands Biodiversity Group. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller with the last four digits, 3230. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Caller with the last four digits, 3230. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Caller with the last four digits, 6091. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Shelley Billick, and I'd like to make a general comment and speak on item number 2.
You have 1 minute for each.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Council members. My name is Shelley Billick. I'm the chair of the Community Forest Advisory Committee, also known as CFAC. We are a city body under the Board of Public Works, and our members are all volunteers chosen by our respective council members and appointed by the mayor to advise the city on policies and programs that deal with trees and green space, what we call our urban forest. So to this item, we've submitted a letter with several positions on this important ordinance, positions that are supported by many of the experts that you've heard from today and their organizations, including Tree People, the California Native Plant Society, Citizens of LA for Wildlife, Center for Biological Diversity, and the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. So CFAC urges you to approve the addition of these 2 native multi-stem tree species. It also urges you to keep the measurement criteria of 4 inches cumulative diameter at breast height, which is 4.5 feet. With this ordinance, you can send a strong message that when we destroy native habitat in the urban wildlife interface, it's gone forever, and it cannot be duplicated by planting nursery stock. We have a lot to learn from the native communities that inhabited Los Angeles. You've heard about that from another speaker. But we are also part of an ecosystem. We depend on nature for our food, our water, shade, cooling, and the very air we breathe. This pandemic has made it even clearer how important nature is to our health and our well-being. So today, you have an opportunity to signal that we all have a responsibility to protect and care for our urban forests. This is a public infrastructure, and it's a public benefit to all. Thank you, and I do want to thank Councilmember Rue for your service. You have been a champion for the urban forest, and we truly will miss you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Caller with the last 4 digits, 5671. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Silva Blackstone, item number 2. Is it about the Toyon trees?
You have 1 minute.
Okay. Can I have 2 minutes? Well, okay. Sorry, I'm kind of overwhelmed with this, but I urge the committee, talking to a city council committee, to not let this go forward unless it's amended with the measurement suggestions that you're hearing from all these groups. I'm a retired arborist, and I could tell you that those particular trees, especially the black walnut, it sprouts from the base. So if there's a fire, the burl at the base is retained, and the tree sprouts again from the base. And you cannot replace, and it keeps the root system and the anti-erosion function of the tree intact. You can't replace that with a little lip from the nursery. So, and the number of trees they're talking about, where do you put them? Okay, so the other thing is, in my other 1 minute, is I want to strenuously object to the in lieu payments. In my experience, the in lieu payments go into a black hole. The trees are never replaced. The street tree people, the urban forest division, or whatever they're calling it now, they have a secret slush fund that is inaccessible to anybody to find out what the heck they're doing with that money. As a previous speaker said, what happens? Do trees ever get replaced? Do they put trees in a park? What do they do with that money? Because in my experience, the money is not just a small fee, it's the total cost of buying a tree and planting the tree, which adds up to a lot of money. So I would urge this committee to take a look at that money that is being charged to all these developers, and it's going into the black hole of bureaucracy. Thank you.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 5417. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and item you'd like to speak on.
Yeah, it's James. I'd like to complain about the investigators of the right-of-way. We're not getting anything done. There's constantly vendors that are blocking the public right-of-way, violating the ADA rules. Why are we spending these money on investigators, and we're also wasting our time with them? I mean, it's just ridiculous. We need to figure out something else. I'd like it to be put on the agenda so that we can find out what we're getting for our money. Please. Thank you.
All right, I believe that's the last caller, and our time actually has run out, but we had just a couple last, so we got everybody in who called, and now we can move on. As I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to recommend that we move items 3, 4, 5, and 7 on consent. So unless there is an objection to doing so, and I don't see any objections on the screen, but Ms. Kidd, if you would call the roll on those en banc items.
Mr. Chair, it was brought to my attention that the representative from IPC would like to speak on item number 7.
Okay. I mean, we were going to take it on consent, so.
Oh, no. We can continue the vote as mentioned.
What's that?
I said if you'd like to proceed with the vote as mentioned on consent.
Yeah, I mean, if there's let's take it on consent. I know we've got a time schedule that we're trying to keep to, and we've got some members that have to leave. So we'll move items 3, 4, 5, and 7 on consent. Seeing no objection, if you could call the roll.
Calling the roll, Councilmember Blumenfield.
I'll tell you, we'll hold 7. If there's time, we'll do it at the end. How about that? So just do 3, 4, 5 on consent, and if there's time, we'll allow comment on 7 from the speaker. So.
Thank you, Mr.
Right,
Chair.
you can call the roll on 3, 4, and 5.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Ruth.
Aye.
Councilmember DeLeon.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Aye.
And Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
5 ayes. Items 3, 4, and 5 are approved on consent.
Great. And we're going to jump to item 6 because I've been informed that we have a number of staff from LAPD and DD Hirsch that are here, that some of whom have another engagement. So we're going to move to that item next. This is an element in an overall plan to bring in more appropriate services that are tailored to solve the root problems rather than just maintain it. It's about mental health and substance use disorder in our emergency dispatch services. And at this time, if you could read that item into the record, we will bring up Bianca Swan and Lieutenant Kelly Munitz and John Goldfinger. But if you could first read the item into the record.
Item number 6 is a City Administrative Officer report relative to the recommendation of the Innovation and Performance Commission to approve funding for the Innovation Fund for the Los Angeles Police Department Call Direction to Ensure Suicide Safety, acronym CRESS, pilot.
Okay, great. Ms. Swan, if you want to get us started.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. I'm Bianca Swan, Project Coordinator for the Innovation and Performance Commission. The Innovation and Performance Commission recommends funding of $378,522 for the Los Angeles Police Department Call Direction to Ensure Suicide Safety, also known as CRESS, Innovation Fund Pilot. Through this pilot, LAPD will collaborate with the D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center to create a 911 diversion program to divert identified mental health calls to D.D. Hirsch in an attempt to decrease the call burden on LAPD's patrol services, as well as decreasing violent and traumatic encounters between police and people suffering from mental health crises. I also wanted to add a recommendation to this item to read into the record, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted the addition is authorize the Chief of Police to negotiate and enter into a 1-year agreement with D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center, subject to the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners and subject to the City Attorney's approval as to form, for the purpose of performing the call direction to ensure suicide safety pilot, and in the amount of $378,522. That's the end of that addition. And so I am joined by members of LAPD and D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center to provide an overview of the pilot and to answer any questions you all may have.
Great. And do either Lieutenant Munitz or Mr. Goldfinger wish to make some opening comments, or do you want to answer questions?
Lieutenant Munitz, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I just want to thank this council for the opportunity to embark on something that really is important and cutting edge for law enforcement, and really allowing us to provide a better service to those suffering from mental illness. The 911 diversion line is going to allow us to divert calls directly to the proper resource in the first place, so we aren't having law enforcement responding to calls that just really we don't have the tools to do properly. So anyway, it's an exciting project and really cutting edge for the entire nation. Dr. Goldfinger?
Sure. Thank you, Lieutenant. And thank you again to the council. I would just say, you know, as a pediatrician, I've spent most of my career trying to ensure children, teens, young adults, families, and adults in our communities have access to the right mental health services, the appropriate services, at the right place and the right time. And we have spent years at D.D. Hirsch working with the LAPD to come up with just such a strategy. It is innovative, as Lieutenant Muniz shared, but the proposal you have before you that the Innovation Commission approved or suggested for funding in your report is really state-of-the-art. This is the best of the best. D.D. Hirsch is the original suicide prevention center in the nation, based in Los Angeles, and the largest one, serving those in mental health and suicidal crisis across the nation, and especially a large portion of them in Los Angeles. So this would increase our capacity in partnership with the LAPD to ensure that, as Lieutenant Muniz said, our officers are not put in a position that they're not ready or able to handle in the best possible way, and most importantly, our citizens are served in a very safe manner the way D.D. Hirsch does for our entire nation, and we know we can in partnership with the LAPD.
Great, thank you. And D.D. Hirsch certainly has an amazing reputation, and thank you for all the work that you do. No question in my mind that this is a great program, and being able to divert calls will be great for the folks who need the help, and it will hopefully help with LAPD by allowing us to redirect resources. It is a little tricky in the sense, though, that the county is really responsible for paying for mental health and for paying for health services. So it is another example where the city is stepping in to do a county function. And that being said, I still think this makes sense because it is going to save us money and resources, and I think we need to pilot this to move it forward. But ultimately, I want to see us, move this forward and then get the county to actually step up and do what they need to do so that we can expand this, because this is part of the tensions we have with the county. But tell me a little bit about how this fit into other programs such as the mental evaluation unit, the therapeutic vans. How does it all fit together?
So I can begin, I guess. So the way that it's going to impact our mental evaluation unit, and just for reference, I'm the officer in charge of the SMART teams, our camp unit, and our threat management unit. We handle the city of LA roughly handles 21,000 mental health related calls every year. And our SMART teams, which are our field response teams that are paired up with an officer and a clinician, they're only able to handle about 7,500 of those calls every year, meaning a patrol car is handling the remainder of those calls. So being able to divert what we anticipate to be about 25% of those calls is going to decrease about 5,000 calls every year that a police officer is not having to respond. And then that also lets more SMART teams be able to respond to those calls that are needing a police and or the clinician response. So that's how it's going to impact our MEU. And what was the other question, sir? The impact our MEU and...
Yeah, how it all fits together, that, and also the new therapeutic
with the therapeutic vans. Yes, I can let Dr. Goldfinger speak more to that, but we're going to have a triage system, and I think this is just a drop in the bucket to a larger plan with Department of Mental Health and a center that they're planning on creating, but it's still a bit down the line. This is going to be able to be implemented in January, and we've already begun training, we've already begun policy, and are able to run with this now, and it eventually should be absorbed by Department of Mental Health so it can be deployed on the larger picture to include the therapeutic vans. Dr. Goldfinger?
Sure. So, to your point, Councilman Blumenfeld, Dr. Sharon of the Department of Mental Health and I, have discussed this, and one of the reasons we brought this to the city is because, as Lieutenant Muniz shared, the county and the Board of Supervisors have motioned to have a massive system that includes this, but also includes people deployed in the field, the vans, even more scaled efforts at having mental health urgent care facilities. This is a massive multi-year effort that the county is looking to do, and I actually asked Dr. Sharon at one point to not feel as if, the perfect should be the enemy of the good, or the grandiose vision of our county for a alternative crisis response network that is so massive and so inclusive of the, I would say, continuum of services on the mental health crisis and suicidal prevention spectrum that can be offered, to not allow that overhaul to derail a very, very important program for our communities and their safety. And so that is the reason why this came before the Innovation Commission. We know that this is the first step in that broader network. Didi Hirsch is going to receive the newly approved and signed national 988 number. People will not be encouraged at some point in early 2022 to call an 800 line that they may not remember. There will be an equivalent to 911, which we all know for a physical health or other emergency. There will be an equivalent for mental health, and that will come to Didi Hirsch. So we are going to be a cornerstone of the county-wide alternative crisis initiative. We already are funded by the county to provide suicide prevention services, many of them in the continuum of care I mentioned. But this particular one was one we felt we wanted to make sure gets off the ground in this crucial moment in history, so that the county can see these financial returns, can recognize the importance of scaling this 24/7 and take it over.
Great. And the geographic area that the pilot's gonna serve, is it limited?
It's the city of Los Angeles. The only limitation will be the hours of operation. Right now, we're anticipating running it from noon to 8 p.m. We'd like to have additional funding, and the original intent, as it's been explicitly explained to me, is to have it be a 24-hour operation. But for now, we're very thankful to get the pilot up and get the 8 hours so we can get the systems up and running. But in answer to your question, it will cover the entire city of Los Angeles.
That's great. And then you mentioned January, but is there a training period, or for the pilot? Does it really hit the ground running come January?
So I've been working with our communications division. We're also concurrently, meaning MEU is also in an effort to reduce our response times. We are now going to be dispatched at the same time for mental health crisis calls as the patrol unit. So in collaboration with both of these projects, I've been working with communications. They're planning on doing training for their dispatchers in the coming weeks. That's it's not on yet. They don't have specific dates. But my last meeting on Tuesday, they said that we should be able to have this up and running in January. So the only training component remaining would be for the PSRs. But again, that's well on its way.
That's great. Colleagues, I want to open it up for questions. Anyone have a question or comment? We don't have the virtual hands, so you have to raise your actual hand. I don't see any. So I guess one last question. No, I think this is great. I want to move forward, and I think we're in agreement on this item, so I'm going to recommend that we move forward on this item with the amendment that was read by Ms. Swan. And seeing no objection to that, Ms. Kidd, if you would call the roll.
Calling the roll to approve item number 6 is amended. Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Rue.
Aye.
Councilmember De Leon.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Aye.
Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved as amended.
Great. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Now
Thank you so much.
No problem. We'll move back to item 1. And this time I want to invite Rachel Malrick to provide a brief update of the work of the Office of Forest Management is doing to enhance our urban forest and the wildlife environment. And then after this presentation, we will transition directly into item 2, hear the presentations there, and then we can ask questions on both items. But that way we can keep the presentation focused and then move into the elderberry issue, which is item 2. So, Ms. Malrick, welcome. You're on mute. We cannot hear you. We're still not hearing you. Ms. Malrick, we're not hearing you. So she just left the meeting. I think she's going to try to come back into the meeting. Ms. Malrick, can you try?
Try number 2. Can you hear me now?
Yes, whatever you did, it worked. So welcome. And
Wonderful.
The floor is yours for item number 1, and then we'll move to 2.
Well, hello, Council Committee. Again, I am the City Forest Officer, and thank you so much for having me, Mr. Chair and Council members. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you an update. As you all know, I am leading the development of the city's first urban forest management plan. And one of the things I continue to remind our internal and external stakeholders is that the management of our urban forest requires investment in the areas of preservation, maintenance, planting, and community engagement. Appropriate policies and practices in these areas must be part of our strategic vision and plan for our urban forest. We've had significant energy around tree planting through the critical work of our internal and external partners in securing CAL FIRE and other grant funding, as well as through Angelenos receiving free trees through the LADWP Energy Efficiency Free Trees Program that's provided by City Plants. We also have several simultaneous efforts that are considering how we can best address the current canopy inequity that exists in the city of LA, and I'm really excited about the progress we're making on that effort, which I'll share at a future meeting, I'm sure. In the past several years, the this year's challenging budget aside, the council has made significant investments in tree maintenance through the addition of crews for our urban forestry division and for building the future of our urban forest improved management through funding to have Streets LA begin our city's street tree inventory, which currently has over 180,000 sites that are logged into our tree keeper system and 18 neighborhood council areas that have been completed with data collection that's ongoing. Engagement with the public is also really critical to ensure that the public understands the importance of our urban forest resource, as well as ensuring that our community's values and sense of place are included in our developed policies and practices. And this brings me to that last pillar, as I've been calling them, the 4 pillars of urban forest management, which is tree preservation, which is obviously on the forefront of our minds today. Council has provided instruction to myself, Streets LA's Urban Forestry Division, Department of City Planning and Building and Safety to consider how we might strengthen and enhance our policies for tree protection through various motions. And your leadership here has just been critical. In response to those motions, we have developed an internal working group that began meeting at the end of August with talented and experienced staff from across those various departments to help us hone in on what the current structural challenges are in our protected tree ordinance and what the potential solutions might be relative to protecting trees on private property. I know you all are familiar with the fact that about up to 90% of the trees in our urban forest and our urban forest canopy is on private property, and so it's really important that we address thoughtfully the protection of those trees. Some of the topics that have come up early in our internal stakeholder working group have been how do we identify tree resources on site at the beginning of a project? How do we make sure that we gather that information early so that trees that are worth preserving and saving are recognized early enough for us to do something about it? What is a clear methodology of how we can do valuation of those tree resources that we can apply consistently and determine what ecosystem services they are providing and what is being lost if they are removed? What are the mechanisms for reviewing those trees in the various scenarios where trees might be impacted? We've talked about by right versus discretionary projects versus other activities where trees might be impacted. We know that we must have a clear interpretation of reasonable development so that we can provide really clear guidance in that case. And lastly, we need to consider what mitigation strategies are going to be most effective when we do have to remove trees. What are ones that make sense? We've gotten a lot of feedback from the public in terms of concerns that they have around the types of mitigation that have been pursued in the past. In addition to that internal working group that has really brought together a lot of these and informed me really on some of the current practices the city is using on other projects that we might utilize for the protected tree ordinance. What are some current mechanisms that we might utilize? I've also conducted listening sessions with some key stakeholders, and I'm somewhat happy to say that they've identified the same issues. We're having a real consistent message that I'm hearing from the external and internal stakeholders on what our opportunities are to improve our protected tree ordinance. And I look forward to hearing from them more when we have some working groups in the new year to further hone in on what are the things that the community wants to see, how do they feel about some of the recommendations that we're coming up with based on that skill set and understanding and experience we have from the various departments. One other note I'll make, and I am wrapping it up, Mr. Chair, we have a consultant who's supporting our urban forest management plan, and we're having them do a comparative cities analysis to provide us some information on what some other cities of similar scale or that have some progressive tree ordinances, what we can learn from them in terms of how enforcement has worked for them, what mitigation measures have worked, and how they've been able to communicate well with the public through the process, because that's another area that we've heard time and again. How do we notify developers? How do we notify the public and keep them informed so that we see that this is really a transparent process that they can weigh in on and understand clearly? So again, I'm encouraged by the parallels I'm seeing from all the early feedback we have. I'm really excited for the chance to address the structural issues that we have with the current ordinance, and really appreciate you all in your leadership in bringing forward this issue and providing that instruction to us, as tree preservation is a critical component of our urban forest, as the trees that are already there are providing those benefits already, whereas newly planted trees are going to take some time to give us those resources. And that concludes my presentation. If you'd like me to pivot to item 2.
Before you do, we have to formally move there. So thank you. By the way, thank you for the presentation. And it is so nice to have a city forest officer finally in our city and have someone as competent as you and connected with all of the different environmental groups that are out there to be able to move us forward. And this next item we're coming to is not the protected tree ordinance. And I want to state that out clearly because we can always start looking at one little narrow piece and then want to fix everything. But you're working on that big piece with all of these folks, and we're going to work with you. But it is really nice to have you here, and I think hopefully that gives a lot of comfort too to the environmental community, knowing that and knowing that you're at the helm and we'll be working to create that bigger picture with the protected tree ordinance. With that said, Ms. Kidd, if you could read item 2 into the record.
Item number 2 is continued from our October 21st, 2020 meeting. It's a joint Office of Forest Management and Bureau of Street Services and Los Angeles City Planning Commission reports and proposed ordinance relative to amending provisions of sections 12.21, 17.2, 17.5, 17.6, 46.01, and 46.02 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to modify provisions pertaining to protected trees to include the Mexican elderberry and toyon and update regulations. Also note that the Planning and Land Use Management Committee transmitted this matter without recommendation on September 17th, 2019 to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee.
Great, thank you, Ms. Kidd. And Ms. Ballard, before you get started, I just want to say a couple of quick things at the outset. First, I'm a huge advocate for greening our city and protecting our urban tree canopy. And I know that all of the members of this committee are equally committed to that. And at the same time, we're also committed to responsible development as efficiently as possible. We need housing. I have a tremendous respect for Streets LA leaders, and that includes our urban forestry division as well as our chief forest officer. At the same time, I have a lot of respect for our Citizens Forest Advisory Committee, who are volunteers and they are committed to this cause. Usually everyone's on the same page. Unfortunately, on this item, folks are not in complete alignment as usual. My goal will be to move a compromise policy today that does use a cumulative branch measurement approach, but working hard to do the best we can for our tree canopy through this ordinance, but also through the wildlife pilot study and other pending motions and the PTO overhaul. In terms of this item, it's imperative that we pass something as these protected trees are dying out because they're not properly protected. And it's also important that we don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. And so for this item, we have representatives from the Office of Forest Management, Streets LA, City Planning to answer questions. And Ms. Malrick, if you can kick us off with an overview of the draft ordinance and the recommendations in the Joint Office of Forest Management and the Streets LA report. So go ahead, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, and I appreciate that overview. You've stated very, very clearly what we're looking at, which is, and I will be brief, and I want to hand it over to Streets LA's Chief Sustainability Officer and Assistant General Manager Greg Spotts in just a moment to talk about some of the implementation challenges. But obviously, we know that the protection of these two species is really important, particularly as the city has a number of goals related to biodiversity, and we care about the preservation of habitat and ecosystem health. And one of the challenges we faced when wanting to not delay another moment in protecting these two native species is the challenge of that protected tree ordinance overhaul that you mentioned, and really trying to find recommendations that allowed us to move forward with protecting those species right now while not reopening the ordinance and delaying the protection of those species. And so I worked with Streets LA and Department of City Planning and others to identify and propose the solutions that are outlined in our joint report that we provide to this committee on how we could move forward at this point in time for your consideration. We think that we've addressed the implementation concerns that could cause significant issues or delays in acting on the addition, and we felt that these changes were necessary to ensure a smooth rollout of the proposed protections. And with that, I do want to turn it over to Greg Spots to discuss the impact on the department and their perspective in detail.
Great. Mr. Spots, the floor is yours. Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, Chair and council members. I'm Greg Spots, Assistant General Manager and Chief Sustainability Officer for Streets LA, and I guess I should begin by paying tribute to our outgoing Chief Forester, Tim Tyson, who's retiring this week, taking the separation incentive plan. And Tim worked very closely with all the stakeholders and with Rachel on this issue and all other policy matters that are developing as we protect our urban forest. Tim brought 40 years of experience to his time running the division. The very first thing that I did when I got this executive role 5 years ago is I promoted Tim Tyson, and it's probably the smartest thing that I ever did. So I'm really, really going to miss him. And I thank him. I know that he's listening as he's cleaning out his office today and tomorrow. Our division at Urban Forestry is very excited to bring these two species, the toyon and elderberry, into the realm of the protected tree ordinance. It is complicated to figure out what the right size criteria should be, not because we don't want to protect as much of the toyon and elderberry as possible, but because the more lower the minimum size is, the more parcels will end up needing to get a permit. And it just keeps increasing the scope of the potential workload here, and also, creates potential conflicts between property rights of the property owner and this important ecological mission to protect the plants. So we're supportive of the original not yet amended draft of the ordinance. It's the result of a lot of careful compromise in which some stakeholders who are developing properties who weren't really represented in today's public comments, their concerns have also been part of that compromise. But our number one concern really is to make sure that, promptly after enacting this, that staff is provided so that we can handle the incremental workload, which is to an extent unknown. A very interesting thing is the prevalence of these native shrubs is not completely known. And, a year or two from now, when we've received a bunch of tree reports documenting all the plants on different properties that folks plan to develop or redevelop, we'll know a lot more about whether the criteria that's selected today is a criteria that's actually workable to enable some reasonable development and protect the ecosystem at the same time. To some degree, that may be something we'll all need to reconvene 2 to 3 years from now when we actually have real experience with actual parcels, with people building ADUs, people doing a carport, and that pertains both to the minimum size and to whether or not it's feasible to replant on site. Because by definition, when you develop a parcel, you're reducing the amount of growing area. So you can't always, have a 1-for-1 or 4-to-1 replacement on the same parcel if some of the parcel's being kind of taken out of service for planting. So the other thing I did want to mention is, the right qualification for professional staff to do this work are licensed arborists. The property owner hires a licensed arborist to make a tree report of all the plants on the property, and then Streets LA supervisors who are licensed arborists process the application for the removal. We have more than 24 licensed arborist supervisors in Streets LA. The only people who work on these issues are the supervisors of ours that are licensed arborists. There's a bonus for that, so there's an incentive. Almost all, I'd say 70-80% of our supervisors have this license and keep doing their continuing education. So we do have the right people with the right expertise, but we will need additional positions because this will create a whole new set of applications where either there's now protected tree species and toyon and elderberry on the property, or there's a parcel that we wouldn't normally see because there aren't any protected trees, but there are these protected shrubs on the property. So we thank you for your consideration, and we're here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Spots. In fact, one of the clarifying amendments I'm going to propose is to make sure that the designee is is an arborist, which I think will give everyone a sense of assurance, and it's already the way that you're envisioning it. So that's great. I can move on to questions. Was there any other, Mr. Whalen or anyone else from staff have comments up front? If not, then I'll move into just some questions. So I know that our departments are facing negative impacts. This recession, we haven't seen, it hasn't been this bad in over a decade. This is the worst we've ever had it financially. How is the addition of these new protected trees going to impact Streets LA's Urban Forestry Division's workload? You mentioned we're going to have to reevaluate, but how's it going to impact us right away?
So, right now we have 5 people in the permitting unit, of which one is a dedicated position for the driveways, where you move the driveway, and we're protecting that street tree now and reviewing that in advance. That was the last time we changed our tree policy for permits for removals, and at that time we did have a dedicated position attached when the council enacted that new policy, and that was really helpful. Our twin challenges are that absent additional staff, the staff that's already serving other customers will have to process these new workload of the Toyon and Elderberry processing times across all tree permits that we're handling and all the different development-related work that we're doing. Also, a bigger challenge in this particular division than the separation incentive plan is managed hiring. I have 9 or 10 vacancies right now out of my 40 urban forestry supervisors, and I can't fill any of those because of managed hiring. So it could be that part of the help the council brings is perhaps unlocking the ability to fill some of those existing positions. These are not SIP vacancies. These are vacancies for other reasons, people promoting out, people taking jobs at other jurisdictions or in water and power. That would really help me because I'm short almost 10% of my supervisors at present.
Great. Yeah, well, we certainly want to help you. I know it is a tough time, and I want to maybe a question for Ms. Mallard. This is sort of the bigger picture, I guess. I know you're considering additional reforms to the protected tree ordinance, such as, importantly, assisting developers at the beginning of the permitting phase versus near the end. Sierra Club's letter to this committee made a good point that developers should be advised at the outset of their projects what the city expects as far as trees goes, so that the removal of the protected native trees and shrubs are avoided up front. That would save time, that would save staffing. They should be informed early, and any trees that are absolutely necessary for removal will need to be mitigated through the planting of the same species on site at the current 4-to-1 ratio. The education of the developers at the front end could serve to make the removals and replacements less common generally, and could reduce the need that they always have for off-site and out-of-kind replacement. We could avoid a lot of this if we took up this issue and address this overhaul. And Mr. Koretz had a motion that I seconded to do just that. So what are the other reforms you're looking at when these were, and how is this all going to fit together when these reforms are expected to be presented to the council for consideration? And when are they?
Yeah, so I think I please nudge me if I'm not answering the question you're asking, but so we're looking at, again, do we look at adding additional trees to, significant, what other jurisdictions might refer to as significant trees, trees that are not native to the area, but maybe of a significant size and providing significant value. We're looking at alternative mitigation strategies, because currently a lot of the feedback we get, and Mr. Spot spoke to this, in terms of when you're putting a building down where there were plants that were very happy, and then saying, oh, I'm going to plant 4-to-1 back on that site, it ends up being something that's biologically unsustainable. And we hear frequently from the advocates when they see too many trees going back into a space. And so we need to look at how we do mitigation. And within that, goes back to how we do valuations of the tree. To the Sierra Club's point, I 100% agree. How we communicate to developers, that's again why we're looking with that internal team better understanding, when are the permits starting at building and safety versus a city planning project or other cases where trees are being removed, and how can we intercede in that first moment? What's the appropriate mechanism to get folks to document the trees on their site so we can have that conversation at the very beginning? And our like I said, the consultant team that's been doing the comparative cities analysis has showed us a couple examples of other cities having something akin to a tree declaration at the beginning, where someone has to say, this is what I have on my site, and we're trying to find what's the appropriate way to do that that's reasonable and thoughtful and captures those environmental resources early. So I feel like I'm just scratching the surface, because there are just layers of things that we want to improve upon as there is a lot of really good that can be done here, and I feel like there's a lot of really good energy around it. Again, I feel like a lot of the issues have been identified, and we've begun exploring what the different solutions might be, and then we'll be able to move forward with talking with community members and you all about how you feel about some of those different options. And I'm hoping to do that, within, I would hope within the next 6 months or so, be able to provide you some detailed recommendations that you could provide us some feedback on, if not much sooner.
Great. And also wanted to ask you directly about the CFAC, the Citizens Forest Advisory Committee. They did a series of recommendations in their letter. If you could give us your thoughts about those recommendations, either of you or both of you, that would be helpful as well, as we try to thread the needle here.
Yeah, I can go ahead. Again, with the size, I think I've talked with several folks. When do you determine that a plant is more or less valuable? I think here we were trying to say, let's start with something and see what the impact is on the department, see how many parcels it brings up, gather some data, and then because we have this overall happening, we can come back and say, you know what, actually we do think that it's not protecting enough species if we do the 2 inches at 4.5 feet, which was our recommendation, not cumulative, but a single stem of at least 2 inches. And again, trying to say, how do we move forward with not having this be so cumbersome that development is slowed significantly because there isn't enough staff to provide that oversight. There's a couple other things there, but ultimately, I was trying to be alongside the original, what I understood the original intent of the ordinance, which was to protect things that had significant ecological value. It started with the oaks, which again might be 50 to 100 years old and would be very hard to replace in our lifetime. And now we're adding species that are shorter lived and smaller, that also very valuable, but kind of going, okay, well, let's take some that are of significant size that would be hard to replace quickly. And I hear that the advocates feel strongly that we should protect more. I would like to see what we're really dealing with. And I thought starting with something that was recommended by Tim Tyson through a thoughtful process was a good place to start. Their second recommendation of in-kind replacement, I do want to address that the language that we asked to be included was relative to what I already discussed in terms of biological sustainability in terms of the replacement. So occasionally the Board of Public Works, when they are considering 3 or more trees that are being removed, so the trees that are 1 or 2 protected trees being removed are determined by the designee, but anything 3 or more does go to a public hearing with the Board of Public Works. And there are times where we find that there are more replants than can fit on site. And again, not wanting to have to go back to the Planning Commission or another body to do another round of approvals, we said, how can we give the board some flexibility to do those replants without triggering a slowdown of the start of this implementation? We want to protect these species now. We don't want that to be delayed. What can we put in the language so it allow the board flexibility or the advisory agency flexibility in their decision making when there are too many plants to go back on a single site? The intention is not to replace out of kind, except if we're taking trees that won't fit on the site in a biologically sustainable manner, because Streets LA does not have a place in which to plant Toyon and elderberry. And in those cases, we'd want to say, okay, let's plant oak or sycamore, something that we can plant off-site. The goal is not to plant off-site, but in these extreme cases where even the advocates are telling us this replant plan does not make sense, how can we give ourselves the ability to move forward with providing mitigation for those trees and shrubs? with the current ordinance as it is. And I hope that was clear. Again, we've been in the weeds on it. So, and obviously dedicated staff for implementation, that's something that we've all discussed and are in agreement on. And the full cost recovery really is essential. The recommendation for it to be staffing in a different unit, I think that the expertise needed and where in the process, what department, where in the process trees are reviewed is part of what we're looking at in the overhaul. All the other cities that we've looked at, I've by and large seen have all of their tree experts in one place. LA County we've looked at, and their tree experts are in their fire department. City of San Francisco, I believe it's within their public works jurisdiction, and they have their tree removals, protected tree removals reviewed by those arborists that already fulfill that role for that jurisdiction. And we have experts within the city family for that. I think your point earlier about the wildlife pilot study is really important, because I think we're touching on two native plant species right now, but there are other understory plants that provide value, and I think the work being done on the wildlife pilot study to look at a site as a whole, as an ecosystem, thinking about fencing and lighting and different plant types and how we develop those spaces is actually going to be perhaps more in line with what the advocates are hoping for in terms of looking at the development of sites in a thoughtful way to the ecology of the site. But I would say that we have arborists on staff, and they are within the Urban Forestry Division. And any other additional changes we can look at in the overhaul. If we get overwhelming support for one thing or another through that process, then we can bring that back to the council committee at that time.
Okay, I want to give my colleagues, any questions or comments? Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I want to thank all the advocates who called in, and a handful of them friends of mine. So Lynette and Paul and others, thank you so much for calling in and really staying focused on this issue. And I want to thank also the city departments for your work on this and your presentations. I want to start by saying it's my understanding that the Mexican elderberry and the toyon combined are less than 1% of the urban forest. They constitute less than 1% combined. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. But let me just say, I introduced this motion 7 years ago in October of 2013, my first few months in office. And I know that there are challenges. That's a given. But I'm a little less sympathetic to them because it's 7 years later. And the advocates and the folks who have been around volunteering their time to improve the natural environment in LA and preserve the species that we have. And you heard a lot of the reasons from the folks who spoke, and they're more expert on this than I am. But I think we have to just keep remembering why. I mean, why we want to add the toyon and the Mexican elderberry. And let's just go over what they do for the environment. So the toyon are a habitat for cedar waxwings, mockingbirds, large mammals, just to name a few. The elderberry, the Mexican elderberry, rabbits, squirrels, deer, pheasant, and even quail. And these shrubs, trees are so important to the local ecology, and we've lost even more since the last inventory was done, and we're not going to gain anymore if we don't start protecting them. Protecting them could have benefits beyond just, regulating protected trees on private property. They could actually encourage the expansion of these protected trees and shrubs. Many, many years ago in Glassell Park, I lived along Division Street, bordering a canyon, and I installed a gate so that I could just walk into the canyon behind my house, and all of it private property, but everyone collectively enjoyed the canyon, and there was a stand, an enormous stand of a toyon grove, and very few backyard fences, and this was a wildlife habitat. There were trails leading into it, probably from either cottontail rabbits or coyotes, or maybe a mixture of both, but it was a habitat, and it was vast. And one day it just disappeared. The private property owner simply cleared it, and I have to believe that the property owner may not have even known the habitat that was provided to these animals that everyone enjoyed on their walks. And so part of it's an education as well. So whether you own a home on private property already, or whether you're going to build on a parcel that is, platted for construction, for home construction, it's incumbent upon everyone to understand the ecological benefits of these last wild remaining habitats and these plants and trees. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is a long time coming. And so I have a few questions. And I first want to pay tribute to a few of the members of the Community Forest Advisory Committee who have passed away in the last 7 years. Pete Lassen of Echo Park, who I knew very, very well, and my friend Michael O'Brien, who worked for the planning department. Michael would be able to give you a class on the Latin names of all the plants, the well-known English names of all the plants. And he was a font of knowledge and information, and he is missed. But we have very, very talented volunteers on this advisory committee now who are passionate about these issues for good reason. So I just want to give them a shout out. I also want to give Phyllis Nathanson and Tom Rothman from planning, my team, Christine Peters, has been working on this for years and years. And so I want to thank everyone who's been involved in this. One question I mentioned the less than 1% of the Mexican elderberry and the toyon combined make up the urban forest. So do we have a percentage on that, an exact number? And through everyone's research and years of work on this, can you elaborate a little more on that? Because it's just something that I've grown to understand, but I just want to hear if I'm right, what your thoughts are, and how would that impact staffing if it's less than 1%?
I have seen some research on we don't have a current assessment, right? We haven't been able to go into people's backyards and those canyon areas and document where those species are. And that's one of the challenges we face in developing recommendations for this. I would say that even if it is 1% of the urban forest, we estimate that our urban forest has around 10 million trees. So we're still looking at 100,000 trees if we're saying it's 1%. And again, this is very rough and based on older data that we haven't been able to ground truth. And like you said, we may have lost species in that time, even in the site that you were mentioning. And we know that that is happening. That's part of the reason we want to act now in moving forward with these protections. So I think that if we were to say that 100,000 mark, that's still a significant number of properties. And that workload being unknown is part of what is challenging. Right, and that's part of the reason included in the recommendations is this adjustment to the fee structure, so that we can make sure that we're getting cost recovery on these projects, and hopefully, when things improve, are able to have the Urban Forestry Division have adequate staff to do the kind of inspection and enforcement on these sites that they'd like to be doing, in terms of going out and looking and seeing, is there the protective fencing? Are the developers doing the right thing as they develop these projects?
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I have faith and confidence that administratively we can creatively figure this out, just in the collective interest of the environment and preserving the environment. And so, and you had mentioned, Rachel, you had mentioned earlier the ideas about the different departments managing this whole entire system. Can you talk about the merits of Streets LA versus city planning versus building and safety in terms of where this oversight and process is administered departmentally?
You know, I think that we're still working on that. I have done a significant amount of looking and listening with, again, internally, and then looking at other examples of other cities. And I'm not really ready to give a recommendation other than saying the thing I've seen thus far is that we have the expertise in-house in Urban Forestry Division, and typically if you already have the expertise in a certain section, that's where we're seeing other cities make decisions. I do know that we want to look at how we better empower the folks looking at projects within planning, those project review staff, whether it's additional training or resources there, or again, an improved process where those plans are documented. We catch those trees and they get to the Urban Forestry Division, being adequately resourced by a new fee structure in the future, so that we can catch those trees. So that may change as we continue to look at, what is working, what needs to change, how does the interdepartmental relationships right now function well, where can we find improvements where we're already having really productive conversations. But I don't have a recommendation at this point whether or not we should look to a different unit to review this.
I look forward to that evaluation.
Well?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, Greg, thanks.
And thank you for all that background and history, Councilmember, and for your driving this forward. I just want to share with everybody that really, we're constantly improving in this regard at Streets LA. 6 or 7 years ago, there wasn't a CEQA discussion in the board reports for tree removals. And a few attorneys brought that forward, and we hired a consultant using BOE's relationships. They taught us how to do it, and now we're doing CEQA reviews and matching the board report to the original, CEQA documents on the underlying project. That's an improvement. Originally, when I joined Streets LA in a previous role 8 years ago, Urban Forestry reported to the finance guy. Now Urban Forestry reports to me, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer, and I have that orientation as I manage this division. Also, there's our leader, Adel Hashkhalil. And Adele really has empowered me and the team to stand up for the trees in a way we previously weren't. And really, I feel like Adele's really given me sort of rocket fuel as the Chief Sustainability Officer to really go big on all of these important matters. And so there may be people who went to a hearing 5 years ago, 8 years ago. The department continues to evolve, and we really are partners and champions here on this issue.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate you listening to the advocates, and they are our spirit guides on this. You heard about the first, the native peoples, the Chumash, the Tongva, the Tataviam. This is beyond just trees. There's a spiritual component to this, and I think people realize that more and more. So I appreciate you all looking at it differently, thinking about this differently. I think collectively, people value our urban forest, our urban canopy, our native indigenous species, of which have diminished greatly as well. And so I applaud everyone for this collective effort, and I look forward to hearing about next steps. Thank you so much.
Great. Any other colleagues have questions or comments? Thought I saw Mr. Rue with a comment. No? Okay, Mr. Speth, just a quick question on the arborist issue. Are arborists ISA certified?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Okay, because it was requested that if we designate arborists, that we make sure that they're ISA certified. So that wouldn't be a problem from our perspective. But
I don't know if you'd want that in the ordinance, because this industry is constantly changing, and you wouldn't want to have to change the ordinance if the sanctioning body changed its name or something like that. I think licensed arborist is probably sufficient.
Okay. All right. So then, with that, there's been a great discussion, and Mr. O'Farrell, thank you again for your initial work. Everyone on this committee, everyone who's been involved in this, has really put forward a great effort. So, and I understand, and I know this is tricky, our department, even before coming to this committee, you made a solid compromise with this motion to get it here. And yet, I want to take it a little bit further, but with the understanding for all of our stakeholders, including me, that we're in a dire financial situation because of this pandemic, and it's getting worse, and it's going to be difficult to implement. All that being said, we want to move the policy, keep working hard to do the best we can for the tree canopy through the ordinance, through the wildlife pilot study, as we talked about, through pending motions, the PTO overhaul. I know we can agree. Therefore, my recommendations are the following. One, to request the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance based on the planning department's proposed ordinance dated May 3rd, 2019, with the revisions recommended in the Bureau of Street Services report dated October 14, 2020, with two exceptions. The two exceptions are, one is the measurement at which these trees are protected. I'd like to recommend that we protect at 4 inches cumulative. Second, on page 3 of the department report, or within the ordinance under 1705R4A and 4602C1, strike the word designee and replace it with licensed or certified arborist. And please also add that when the replacement concerns more than 2 of the protected trees, the permit in question will have a full public hearing at the Board of Works as quickly as possible. Number 3, to instruct the City Administrative Office and Streets LA to report with a staffing plan for the administration of the additional work generated by the addition of the Mexican elderberry and toyon to the protected tree ordinance, including Streets LA recommendation of a minimum staffing level increase of two tree surgeon supervisors and 1 management analyst to manage the protected tree removal program. And then 4, to instruct the CAO and Streets LA to report with an updated fee structure in order to fully recover the costs, the city's costs, for the protection and replacement of protected trees and shrubs. So that would be the motion to move that forward with those amendments. And
second.
Been properly seconded. Thank you. And so now we will call the roll on that item. Ms. Kidd.
Calling the roll to approve item number 2 as amended by the chair, Councilmember Blumenfield.
Ms. Kidd, if you could call the roll on the item.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Calling the roll to approve item number 2 as amended by the chair, Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Rue.
Aye.
Councilmember DeLeon.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Aye.
And Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved.
Great. And I had promised members we'd be done by 3, and I think Ms. Swan wanted to speak on item 7, so we have a little bit of time to move to that item. So if you could read item 7 into the record.
Item number 7 is a City Administrative Officer report relative to an Innovation and Performance Commission recommendation to approve funding from the Innovation Fund for the Los Angeles Zoo, LA Zoo solar-powered mobile device charging station pilot.
Wonderful.
Hi again. Bianca Swan, project coordinator.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to read a technical correction for this item. It's for recommendation number 2. It should read transfer $31,600 from the Innovation Fund on number 105/10, account to be established Zoo, Los Angeles Zoo solar-powered mobile device charging stations to fund number 40E/87 Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund as follows. Fund 40E, Department 87, account number to be established, account name, mobile device charging stations, amount $31,600.
Great.
That was it.
And obviously, if you want to say a quick word about what this item is and why it's a good innovation.
Absolutely. So the Innovation and Performance Commission is recommending $31,600 for the Los Angeles Zoo solar-powered mobile device charging station Innovation Fund pilot. This pilot will allow zoo visitors to enhance their experiences by allowing them to take videos, photos, and social media, as well as utilize online services related to the zoo without worrying about their devices dying. These stations will also sanitize these devices while charging them. So I do have a zoo representative if you wanted to hear any more or have any questions. Otherwise, we are perfectly okay with that item being taken.
All right. Colleagues, any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, I think we can move this item forward. I see no objection. So if you could call the roll, Ms. Kidd.
Calling the roll to approve item number 7 as amended by the IPC. Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Councilmember Rue.
Aye.
Councilmember DeLeon.
Aye.
Councilmember Alfaro.
Aye.
And Councilmember Lee.
Aye.
5 ayes. This item is approved.
Great. And Ms. Kidd, will you confirm that conclude all the items on our agenda?
No further items remain, Mr. Chair.
All right, then. Well, thank you all for being part of this meeting.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Leon, go ahead.
Just one quick second, and apologize, sort of a point of personal privilege, just very quickly. I wanted to make a comment, a little earlier today when we had this sort of the repulsive sort of what I would call violent verbal barrage of the callers who made their calls much more earlier today. This is a question that perhaps maybe offline. I don't know who the staff city attorney is for this committee specifically, but I mean, just a commentary. And I know I'm new to city government and the culture of city government, but I think that staff members have rights as well. We have a black woman who's our chief consultant or secretary to the committee, and Ms. Kidd. I don't speak for Ms. Kidd at all whatsoever. We have you as well as others who are Jewish Americans, me as a Latino. I understand the First Amendment, and the right for free speech and so forth, but I know in other municipalities, this is not tolerated at all whatsoever. I don't know about the legal case or precedents on this issue, but I know in other cities, as soon as one word epithet is verbalized, boom, it's cut, And I think is that this is a culture that normalizes this type of behavior. And ultimately, Mr. Chair, I defer to you always, as our leader in this committee. So, this is a conversation, I think, with the city attorney or whoever the city attorney staff is to have an online conversation, because this is, to me, and again, I just speak subjectively on my behalf, this is intolerable. It's repulsive, it's reprehensible in every which way imaginable. And the very fact that this is normalized continuously, either in the full body of the council or in the commissions, it adds to the absurdity and makes this just a complete mockery. This is something that wouldn't be tolerated in a nanosecond, through your experience in the state capitol. Yet for some reason, I don't know, again, if it's a city attorney's advice, again, we don't have to get into this conversation right now, but I just want to lay it out there because, again,
appreciate the point. Because we haven't, it's not agendized on the Brown Act, we can't actually have a conversation about it.
Absolutely. That's why I just wanted to make my own unilateral comment.
Yeah, but I urge you to talk to our Ted Jordan is our city attorney here for this committee. I'm sure you'll find every one of members of this committee agrees with you wholeheartedly. And we have tried numerous things and have been beaten back over the course of these years. So we love your input. We'd love to figure out a way, but we probably have already gone beyond what we can say during this.
Yes, indeed. Councilman DeLeon, I'm Ted Jordan. I'm the staff city attorney for this committee. I'm the general counsel for the Public Works Department as well. Mr. Hayward in your office, we've started a discussion with him already offline regarding this issue. We're not really agendized to discuss it, but point received. We do follow the city council rules, and today's meeting adhered to those rules, including the rules of decorum.
Yeah. Well, whatever those rules are, I think rules can always be changed, but it is what it is. And, Mr. Chair, I always defer to you as our leader in this committee right there. So,
I'm open to all and any ideas. We've been fighting this issue for a while, and it's not just the city rules. We have the Brown Act to contend with, and we could talk about that further, but I would love to work with you on this issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's all I want to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. And Mr. Rue, any last words on this committee? We so grateful to having you on this committee.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a pleasure to serve on this committee, and like I said, you make it easy by wrapping everything up for us and making sure everything is negotiated and compromised. So it's been a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure serving with all of my colleagues, and a lot of challenges ahead for the city of LA. So and I know we're in good hands with my colleagues here on this committee. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.